Open session.
You are unmuted.
All right, so Mr. Jackson, yesterday you told me you would like 10 minutes for your argument. I'll hear you now.
Thank you, Your Honor. Your Honor, I'll be brief. The court must consider, after viewing the evidence in light most favorable to the Commonwealth, whether a rational jury could find the elements of the charges beyond a reasonable doubt. And here, the case that the Commonwealth has submitted to the jury after resting is insufficient to meet such a finding. There's no question but that with this particular prosecution in this particular case, no reasonable or rational jury could come to a unanimous verdict in favor of the Commonwealth. I want to, if I can, focus my argument on count 1, 2, and 3 and a specific element of each count.
Okay.
In each one of those counts, there must be evidence that the vehicle killed John O'Keefe. There has been no competent evidence presented in the Commonwealth's case that Karen Reed's vehicle actually struck John O'Keefe. There's been conjecture, there's been speculation, but no actual competent evidence. The Commonwealth's entire case relies on a theory built on the shoulders of a trooper named Joe Paul, who testified a couple of days ago. And his theory, according to the Commonwealth, is that John O'Keefe's arm was struck, he was spun around in sort of a pirouette, he was projected 30 feet to the left, hit his head on a curb or the road in the intervening time before coming to a final rest spot about 30 feet away. Everything in the Commonwealth's case, everything relies on that theory of damage to the taillight at the scene. If a rational jury could not unanimously determine that Trooper Joe Paul's theory is true beyond a reasonable doubt, then we believe the motion has to be granted. There is no competent medical evidence to support that theory. There's no competent physical evidence that the taillight could break and shatter in the way that they've suggested, and that the arm would not have any breaks or shatters or any damage, any additional damage. There's no evidence how getting hit in the arm could actually launch a body 30 feet, as per the Commonwealth's theory. And there's no evidence how a body hit by a 7,000-pound SUV could sustain no injuries from the neck down, which we just heard this morning. The evidence before the court, the only evidence that is before the court, is that the Commonwealth's own medical examiner does not believe this is a homicide. And she went on this morning to say that in her expert opinion, the injuries are not classic pedestrian injuries, and they are, every single one of them, consistent with a physical altercation. Calling a witness to simply espouse an opinion like Trooper Paul did that belies science, common sensory, and logic, that's not enough to get the case to the jury. The light most favorable to the Commonwealth does not mean that the court must believe the Commonwealth's witnesses. What it means is that if there is a rational controversy in the evidence, the court must accept that evidence that favors the Commonwealth. But here, there is no rational controversy. As put or expressed in Commonwealth versus McCormick, it's a 2023 case found at 491 Mass 848, pinpoint site 860, quote, where the Commonwealth's evidence is entirely circumstantial, it cannot meet its burden if the evidence equally supports inconsistent propositions, as resolution of such a case necessarily requires conjecture or surmise. In our view, there is no question that there's no rational controversy related to the Commonwealth's theory. Trooper Paul's theory is by definition not rational. It's not reasonable. And it's basically based entirely on conjecture. And that's why, in our view, the court is required to find Ms. Reed not guilty of counts 1, 2, and 3. It's because each of the counts, as I said at the beginning, necessarily include an element that John O'Keefe was struck by Karen Reed's vehicle. Thus, if a rational jury cannot reasonably believe Trooper Paul's theory, it's the only evidence presented by the Commonwealth describing how Mr. O'Keefe possibly could have been struck, then Ms. Reed is entitled to an acquittal. Nothing else matters. Nothing else in the court's evaluation, nothing else in the jury's evaluation, nothing. Everything turns on whether or not the car hit John O'Keefe. And the Commonwealth's only theory of how that happened is from Trooper Paul's description. If the court were to deny this motion, then by doing so tacitly, the court is expressly endorsing Trooper Paul's theory of how John O'Keefe was struck, and we don't believe that that's rational. We don't believe that any rational jury would ever unanimously agree with Trooper Paul, and thus we ask the court to find Ms. Reed not guilty at this time.
Okay.
I'll submit.
Your Honor, if I may just, we have a written motion for the
Okay.
court to act on pursuant to that argument. May I hand it to you, clerk? May I copy?
All right. I will hear you, Mr. Lally.
Yes, Your Honor. Surprisingly, I would disagree with counsel's
So let's leave the comments out.
Your Honor, as far as the comments, all I was going to say is that I would submit to the court
Is
that,
this surprisingly that I took issue?
and my apologies for that. What I would submit to the court, Your Honor, is that this case does not rest and fall with the testimony of Trooper Paul. Trooper Paul's testimony, while important when taken in conjunction with the remainder of all of the other witnesses and all of the other testimony that the court has heard, I don't want to minimize it, but at the same time, that is not the only evidence that the vehicle struck Mr. O'Keefe or interacted with Mr. O'Keefe. So what the court has, as far as the physical evidence, next to Mr. O'Keefe's body, the one sneaker in the location of the curb, the glass, the drinking glass that Mr. O'Keefe is seen walking out of the Waterfall Bar at approximately 12:11 a.m. with, that is in the vicinity, the direct vicinity where the Canton police officers actually recover it early in the morning of January 29th. You have the microscopic pieces of the defendant's taillight, which was testified by Ms. Hanley to be consistent with pieces of the taillight from the defendant's vehicle that are within or embedded within Mr. O'Keefe's clothing. You have the remainder of the pieces of taillight, and this part is important in relation to Trooper Paul's testimony as far as the linear momentum, and it's all in the same sort of direction and path of all of the roadway evidence that he observed that's discovered in and around the area where Mr. O'Keefe's body was. The testimony from Ms. Valier, with reference to all of those taillight pieces and how they were able to reconstruct front pieces that were found on the ground and then put back together, matching not only to that, but the taillight housing from the defendant's vehicle. The taillight housing from the defendant's vehicle, which has the victim's, Mr. O'Keefe's DNA contained on it, as well as the mitochondrial DNA testing of the hair that was on the rear right quarter panel of the defendant's vehicle, which also was matched or consistent with that of Mr. O'Keefe, his mitochondrial DNA, as well as court heard from his chart from Bodie Technology. You have the plethora of testimony from the various civilian witnesses from that particular night. You have the evidence of motive from the text communications, as well as the testimony of the children in this case as to the state of their relationship from the defendant's own mouth in those text communications and in those voicemails as to the state of their relationship. You have the testimony in regard to Mr. O'Keefe and his recounting of the state of their relationship and his numerous attempts to break it off with Ms. Reed prior to that date. There are arguments that continue throughout the afternoon of the 28th and seemingly into the 29th. You have the defendant's own statements that I hit him, I hit him, I hit him, that come from multiple sources, including firefighter Nuttall, firefighter Flamati, firefighter McLaughlin, and Ms. McCabe. You have her statements to the paramedics in the back of the ambulance that the last time that she saw Mr. O'Keefe, they had gotten into an argument. You have the testimony in regard to Ms. Roberts and Ms. McCabe as far as the altercation or the verbal argument stemming from Ms. McCabe's reference of Bella's mother being a landmark and being someone that Mr. O'Keefe used to date just prior to that argument occurring in front of the house at 34 Fairview Road. With each and every piece of evidence that was presented throughout the course of the Commonwealth's case, including the forensic evidence, including especially one thing I would stress for the court is taking not only Trooper Paul's testimony, but Trooper Paul's testimony in juxtaposition to Trooper Garino's testimony as far as the vehicle or the native GPS locations of Mr. O'Keefe's phone in reference to the timing and in particular the information or data from the Toyota text stream. Trooper Garino's GPS native location of Mr. O'Keefe's phone has that reversal, the same 3-point turn that Trooper Paul testified about, which occurs 8 minutes prior to the vehicle traveling 24.2 miles per hour for approximately 62 feet in a straight line in reverse. And as far as the testimony and the evidence that the court has before it, the court also has those backup testing videos that Trooper Paul conducted with the defendant's vehicle, so the court can see exactly what that vehicle looks like at approximately 25 miles per hour in reverse in a straight line. And what I would submit, Your Honor, is that there's more than sufficient evidence from a medical perspective, from a forensic perspective, from a civilian witness perspective, and from the investigation of this case as to all 3 indictments that the Commonwealth has met its burden, particularly under the standard before the court at this time. And for those reasons, I would request that the defendant's motion be denied.
Okay. All right. In the light most favorable to the Commonwealth under the prevailing Lattimore standard here in Massachusetts, I am satisfied the Commonwealth has met its burden. The defendant's motion is denied. So, Mr. Yannetti, are you calling your first witness?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay, so let's bring the jurors in, please.
Court, all rise for the jury. Thank you. This court is back in session. Please be seated.
All right, so jurors, if you remember in my preliminary instructions to you a long time ago now, I stressed to you that the burden of proof rests with the Commonwealth. The defendant has no burden of proof whatsoever, doesn't ever have to testify or present any evidence. So the Commonwealth has completed its case, the Commonwealth has rested, and I want you to keep in mind that the defendant has no burden of proof. Ms. Yannetti, do you have a witness for us?
Thank you very much, Your Honor. The defense calls Brian Laughlin.
Okay.
He is. Why don't you step forward? Standing and face the front.
You solemnly swear the evidence you give the court and jury in the case now and hearing should be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
I do. Great.
Can I proceed, Your Honor?
Yes.
Good morning, sir. In a good loud voice, would you state your name and spell your last name?
Sure, it's Brian Loughran. It's Loughran.
And where are you from, sir?
Mr. Lockwood, I'm going to ask you to keep your voice up as loud as you can, sir.
Sorry,
That's okay.
Maybe put your mouth as close to the mic as you can. Where did you grow up, sir?
Canton, Mass.
Is that where you live?
Yes,
How long have you lived there?
both 35, 36 years.
And did you go to Canton Public Schools?
Yes,
Now, in the course of living in Canton, were you familiar with the Albert family?
yes.
Which members of the Albert family were you familiar with?
All of them.
And when you say all of them, can you name the ones that you were familiar with?
I was familiar with Brian,
Brian Albert?
Chris Albert, Brendan Albert, Kevin Albert, and I believe Kathy Albert is the sister, but I'm not 100% sure on her first name.
Okay, and those are the siblings that you had contact with and were familiar with?
Yes,
Did you know some better than others?
yes.
Whom did you know the best?
Chris Albert.
What is the age difference between you and Chris Albert?
I believe we're the same age.
Did you graduate high school with him?
He went to a different high school, but
Okay.
yes,
Graduated at the same time.
correct.
And with regard to your familiarity with Chris Albert, can you explain to the jury how you became familiar with him and what your relationship with him has been?
I went to school with him, elementary school. We went to middle school. Then he transferred to a Catholic school. Then later in years, I began to work for Chris for D&E Pizza, delivering pizzas.
Okay. And approximately what ages were you when you were delivering pizzas for D&E Pizza and Chris Albert?
I was 25, 26 years old.
And how many years did you deliver pizzas for him?
Up until I got married, 35,
So several years.
8 years.
8 years, okay. And with regard to your interactions or knowledge of Kevin Albert, can you describe that?
Kevin Albert would be through D&E Pizza if he came in. Through the police department, would see him on details.
All right. And were you friendly with him?
Yes,
With regard to Brian Albert, could you describe your interactions or your relationship with him?
again, through D&E Pizzas, delivering pizzas to his house. Cordial, polite, would say hello.
All right. So you're friendly with the Albert family.
Correct.
Now, back in January of 2022, where were you working?
I was working for the town of Canton.
In what department?
I was working in the sewer department.
Is that also called the water department?
Yes, water and sewer are combined.
And under what heading is that? The
It's
water.
DPW.
It's under the DPW, the Department of Public Works.
Correct.
Now, back in January of 2022, were you one of the regular snow plowers for the town of Canton?
Yes.
And directing your attention to January 28th of 2022, do you remember that day?
Yes.
What do you remember about that day, the 28th?
It was a potential blizzard. We had been given a start time.
All right. And when you say you had been given a start time, what does that mean?
It means that we're expected to be in our trucks at a certain time on our route.
And who gives those instructions back in January of 2022?
The supervisor for the Canton DPW,
And who was that at the time?
William Walsh.
Also known as Billy Walsh?
Yes.
Now, when were you called in to do plowing that evening or early morning?
We were told to be in by 2:30
And is that 2:30 a.m. or p.m.?
a.m.
Would that now be on January 29th?
Correct.
So what time did you arrive at the DPW that early morning?
About 2:15.
When you got there, what did you need to do in order to go out plowing?
I needed to get into my truck and get that prepared to go out.
All right, and your truck, is there one that's specifically assigned to you when you plow?
Yes,
And does that truck have any particular nickname?
yes, it's called the Franken truck.
And why is it called the Franken truck?
It is a truck that has a lot of different parts than what it's required. It's not parts that were made for that specific truck.
An older one?
Yes, it was a truck that was very uncomfortable at the beginning to use. So they try to make it as comfortable as possible.
All right. And that particular truck, is it used for anything else other than snow plowing?
Yes, it's used for everyday use.
Now, so you get to the DPW at 2:15, you say that you get your truck ready. What does that entail to get your truck ready, and how long does it take?
It takes about 5 minutes, but just basically you need to make sure that it's got enough gas in it so we're not going to the route and running out of diesel fuel, which is not good. It's just basically going over the truck, making sure you have everything you need for that night.
And do you plow alone or with someone?
By myself.
Now, with regard to the visibility in your snowplow Franken truck, can you describe that for the jury, what you can see, what you can't see?
So the Franken truck has an air ride suspensions, an air ride seat. So the seat is raised so I can see over the hood.
Okay.
And I can see about 5 feet on either side of the passenger side, driver's side.
And when you say 5 feet, are you talking straight out from the?
From the windshield straight out.
All right. And what, if any, lighting do you have on Franken truck?
We have marking lights. We have 2 plow lights that are situated at the corners of the trucks, and it's up high. Illuminates very well. It's very well seen.
Okay. And with the extra set of lighting that you just described, how far can you see off to the sides, in front of you, and directly in front of you?
Probably 5 feet on the sides.
Well, so you already testified to that, 5 feet straight out.
Yeah.
But what about the sides going forward?
It's hard to decide to put into words, but I can see a real long distance. That visibility is fine. It is extremely. If you gave me probably 5, 10 feet, 15 feet out, maybe even further.
Okay. And with regard to the lighting, how much light does that give off?
Enormous amounts. It's almost driving with the spotlight.
And with regard to the air ride seats, what action did you take with those that particular night?
I raised it so that the bottom of my knees would hit the steering wheel.
And what, if any, obstructions, I should say, were in front of you that would prevent you from seeing what's in front of you or to the side?
Nothing.
All right. Now, do you have a specific route assigned to you?
Yes, I do.
Could you describe that route? And by the way, that specific route, was that the one that you were assigned on January 29th?
Correct.
Could you describe that for the jury?
Yes, it's a route that consists of Cedar Crest from Kings Road to Chapman Street and everything in between. There are a lot of streets I could name if you would like, but Fairview is one, Spring Lane is one, Cedar Crest, Kings Road. Those are pretty important roads that I would consider major roads on my route.
All right. Now, that particular night, if you got there at 2:15, what time do you think you were on the road by in Franken truck?
I was on Cedar Crest about 2:30, 2:35.
Now, with regard to Cedar Crest, I would like to show you a map if I can. May I approach, Your Honor?
Yes.
I've handed you a document. If you could just review that to yourself and then look up at me when you're done. Do you recognize what's depicted on that?
Yes,
What is it?
it is my plow route and consisting of streets that I plow.
All right. And to be fair, that's a portion of your plow route, right?
Correct.
There are other areas of the city that you plow?
This actually depicts my actual physical route.
Oh, okay, great. And that's a fair and accurate representation of the streets as they existed back in January of 2022?
Yes.
I would offer that, Your Honor.
Any objection, Mr. Lally?
No, Your Honor.
Okay. Thank you.
And could I have permission to publish before the hearing?
Sure.
Okay, now, you just testified that you got to Cedar Crest, I believe, you said 2:30 to 2:35 or so?
Correct.
All right, as we look at this exhibit on the screens, are you going from right to left or left to right on Cedar Crest when you first approach Fairview?
Right to left.
Okay, so you're going sort of from the upper right-hand corner of the diagram down Cedar Crest toward Fairview. Is that accurate?
Yes.
Could you take the laser pointer and just confirm that route for the jury? That's, okay. You see that's Fairview Road? Are you able to read that right?
I'm not, to be honest with you. I'm sorry.
Do you still have that map in front of you? Maybe that'll help you, Mr. Lally.
And actually, can I orient it so it's oriented just like that for him?
Sure.
That's how it's up on the screen.
Okay.
And by the way, I should have asked this, but is it in terms of is it, you can't read the writing or you can't really see the outline of the streets?
Both.
Okay. Well, that's not going to help much. Okay, if we can have the lights back on. With the court's permission, can I leave that up on the screen while I ask a few more questions?
Sure, except you said you can't see it.
Right, no, I know, but the jury can, so I think it would be helpful for them. All right, so you're coming down Cedar Crest, and would Fairview be on your left or your right when you first approach it?
When I first approach, it's on my left.
All right, now, do you take that left at that time?
No, I do not.
Why not?
At the time, I'm pushing snow, and we don't want to block any part of the road with snow, and taking a left would have left a row of snow. So I proceed to the end of Cedar Crest, do a cul-de-sac, and then head back up Cedar Crest.
All right, so there's a cul-de-sac at the end of Cedar Crest,
Correct.
dead end,
Yes.
and you plow that?
Yes.
All right, so then when you come back up, is Fairview on your right or your left?
It is on my right.
What do you do?
I take that right and continue to plow.
Now, are you familiar with the Albert residence on Fairview Road?
Yes.
How did you become familiar with that?
Growing up in Canton, I knew where they lived.
Can I have exhibit 66 displayed with the court's permission?
Yes.
From where you're seated now, Mr. Walker, are you able to see what's on the screen?
Yes.
And do you recognize that?
Yes.
What do you recognize that to be?
That is the Albert house, Brian Albert's.
And when you were passing the Albert home on Fairview, the very first time you passed it, would it have been on your right or your left?
It would have been on my right.
What section of the road were you plowing at that point?
The middle of the road.
Why is that?
I start in the middle and I angle right with the plow.
Now, I want to direct your attention to when you were, your truck was essentially perpendicular to the driveway. You see the driveway in Exhibit 66?
Yes, I do.
When you were perpendicular to the driveway, where were your headlights pointed?
In front of me, in front of the truck,
I'm sorry?
in front of the truck.
And what were you able to see of the front lawn of the Albert residence that very first time you passed?
I was able to see the entire front lawn.
And about what time was it that you first passed 34 Fairview Road?
About 2:45.
Now, as you continued along past the driveway, did you continue to have all of those headlights on in front of you?
Yes.
And as you continued along, what were you able to see of that front lawn? How much of it?
A very large portion, almost to the front steps.
And now, when you're plowing, where is your attention focused, sir?
My attention's focused in front of me and then to the sides.
Why would your attention be focused to the sides?
I am trying to be aware of any side traffic, any pedestrians, and God forbid, any animals.
And when you were passing the Albert residence, as you pass every home, what attention do you pay to the sides of the road and the lawns that are adjacent to the road?
I'm, again, making sure that there are no animals, no pedestrians, and making sure no one's coming out of their driveways, not expecting to see me.
And with regard to Exhibit 66, do you see the flagpole there?
Yes,
Is that something you had seen previously?
yes.
And when you made that first pass by that residence at 2:45 in the morning, sir, with your headlights on, what, if anything, did you see on the front lawn in the area of the flagpole?
I saw nothing.
If there had been a 6'2", 200-pound man lying in the snow there, would you have seen it?
Objection.
Sustained.
Now, once you pass the residence, where do you go?
I go to the end of Fairview.
And what street does that intersect with?
That intersects with Chapman Street.
If we have the previous exhibit put back up with the court's permission. Sure. Okay. Do you still have the exhibit oriented the same way, sir?
Yes, I do.
Where's Chapman Street on the exhibit? Down the bottom, the top, or which?
Down the bottom.
Okay. And when you come to the end of Fairview with Cedar Crest in your rear now, right?
Correct.
Do you take a left or a right on Chapman?
I take a left
All right.
onto
And
Chapman.
once you take that left, what do you do?
I back up and then take a left to go back down Fairview.
Okay, so you're essentially doing almost a three-point turn in the road?
Correct.
All right, so now, do you go back down Fairview at that time?
Yes, I do.
And how far do you go down Fairview?
To the end, to Cedar Crest.
Now, at this point in time, you would also pass the Albert residence, correct?
Correct.
Would it be on your right or your left?
On my left.
Were you looking to the right and the left as you were coming down?
Yes.
How much light did your headlights illuminate of the Albert's front lawn as you were coming down from Chapman Street?
Coming down Chapman, just about the entire front lawn.
And again, with regard to that area around the flagpole, did you see anything on the lawn?
Nothing.
See a body?
No.
All right. Now, after you've done these two passes, sir, where do you go?
I then take a right on the Cedar Crest. I proceed up Spring Lane come down Spring Lane, and then do the remaining of my route.
How long did it take you before you wound up back at Cedar Crest and Fairview?
About 40, 45 minutes.
So I think you had previously testified you made the first pass around 2:45.
Correct.
So would that put us at about 3:30 when you're about to make the second pass?
Objection.
Sustained, ask it to.
Sure, I'm sorry. What time was it, your best estimate in terms of when you would have approached Fairview and Cedar Crest again?
3:15 to 3:30.
All right. Now, when you approach that intersection again, are you approaching it such that Fairview would be on your left or your right this time?
On my left.
Same as last time.
Correct.
What do you do when you approach Cedar Crest? I'm sorry, when you approach Fairview and it's on your left?
At that point, I have an option. I can go to the end of Cedar Crest, or I can turn around at a street, depending on how much snow I have on Fairview.
And with regard to the decision you made regarding that choice, what decision did you make on January 29th at 3:30?
Went all the way to the end.
Went all the way to the end of Cedar Crest.
Correct.
Same thing you did the first time.
Correct.
And then you come back up?
Correct.
Is Fairview on your right or your left at that time?
It would be on my right.
And did you take that right?
Yes, I did.
What, if anything, unusual did you see at that point?
At that point, I saw a Ford Edge on the side of the road
Where was it parked on the side of the road?
in front of the Albert's house,
Where in front of the Albert's house?
by the flagpole.
And why was that unusual?
The Alberts never had cars that were parked out front, and it just stuck out as weird.
Now, what were the snow conditions like at that point? This is now, I think you said about 3:15 to 3:30.
It's starting to accumulate a lot quicker than what it was previous.
And what policies does the DPW have regarding cars parked in the street during a blizzard where there's plowing to be done?
We are to notify the supervisor. At that point, he will make a phone call to the police, and depending on if they can have the resident move it, it gets moved. If not, it gets towed.
And with regard to that policy, did you comply with that policy in those early morning hours?
No, I did not,
Why?
because I was being courteous to the Albert family.
Now, once you saw the Ford Edge parked on the side of the road near that flagpole, what did you do?
I had to go around the vehicle and as to not hit the vehicle.
All right, and probably obvious, but as you're approaching the vehicle, was it faced in the same direction that you were traveling?
Yes,
And so you're going around to the left or the right of the vehicle?
left.
And once, as you were approaching that vehicle, were you able to see on the right side of that vehicle, the lawn side?
Yes,
Did you see anything on the front lawn at that time?
objection.
I'll allow it. Did you see anything?
No,
Lights were still on.
correct.
All right, now, once you pass the vehicle, did anything attract your attention at all?
No.
All right, where do you go?
I go up to the end of Fairview and do the same process, take a left on Chapman and back down Chapman and take a left into Fairview again.
Once you come back down Fairview, do you pass the Albert residence again?
Correct.
Was there that car that you saw?
Correct.
It moved from when you passed it the first time.
No,
Were you able to see the front lawn of the Alberts in front of you as you were coming down Fairview toward Cedar Crest?
not as much as the first time because the car blocked the view.
All right. Now, after that, how long did it take you before you came back to that area to plow again?
About 3 hours.
Do you recall about what time it was that you wound up back on Fairview?
I don't honestly recall what specific time.
Sure.
Um,
Approximately, if it was 3:15 to 3:30, that second time, how, what would be your best estimate of the time when you came back?
I would say if I had to say, it would have been 5:30 up Fairview, and came back down, and then at that point I wasn't able to go further than Carriage Lane.
Okay, and when you say that you went up Fairview and came back down, you initially went from which side of Fairview?
Right side.
What would that be, the right side? I'm sorry. Would it be the Cedar Crest side or the,
It would have been Cedar Crest side.
coming from Cedar Crest, and then you went up Fairview, came back down?
Came back down. As I'm going up, I am actually seeing first responders. And at that point, as I'm coming back down, the road's blocked at that point.
Okay. And when the road was blocked, what, if any, plowing were you able to do after that on Fairview?
I was able to go as far as Carriage Lane and then turn around.
Okay. And then I imagine it was several hours before you could plow again?
Before I could plow Fairview to the end of Cedar Crest, yes.
All right. Now, I'd like to direct your attention to February 15th of 2022. Were you approached by an investigator who wanted to ask you questions about what you had seen and done on January 29th of 2022? Do
Yes,
you remember his name?
yes.
What is it?
Paul?
And what was your understanding about whom Paul worked for?
Objection.
Ask it differently.
On February 15th of 2022, were you ever approached by anybody in law enforcement, sir?
No.
So what was your understanding of Paul's job?
Objection.
I'll see Councilor Tybar.
You are unmuted.
Just a couple questions, Mr. Lochran.
Sure.
At any point in 2022, were you ever approached by any police investigators, sir?
No.
When was the first time that you were approached by the state police in this case? Do you recall?
I don't recall the actual date, but I do know.
Year?
Yes.
What year was that?
2023.
And do you recall the name of the investigator that approached you?
Mike Proctor and Sergeant, and I can't pronounce his name. I don't want to.
If I said Buchanan, would that ring a bell?
Yes, it is.
I have nothing further. Thank you, sir.
Okay, Mr. Lally?
Thank you, Your Honor.
Good morning, sir.
Good morning.
approach?
Yes.
Sir, I'm showing you a document that's already been marked with Exhibit 109. Just ask you to look at that and look up whenever you're finished, okay?
Yes.
You recognize that, sir?
Yes, I do.
And what do you recognize that to be?
These are the plow routes for the town of Canton.
And there's different numbers that are associated with different routes and different drivers assigned to those routes, is that right?
Yes.
And if you look down at number 11, is that your route that you were talking about as far as the sort of portion of Cedar Crest neighborhood that you plow?
Yes.
And that's the route that you were assigned to on January 28th and January 29th of 2022, correct?
Yes.
Now, if I could ask, just as far as there's a certain way that you plow a route. Yeah. Excuse me. There's a certain way that you plow a road, correct?
Correct.
And when you're first plowing the road, you're sort of plowing the middle of the road, correct?
Correct.
And you do it in sort of a fashion that's referred to as ring road right, is that correct?
Yes.
Can you explain to the jury what that is and sort of why you're plowing a road in that particular fashion when you're first starting to get out there with the plow?
So ring road to the right refers to the snow coming off the plow. It actually leaves a row of snow. We ring road to the right to prevent cars from having to go through the ring road to the left. If you go to the left, you've now put the ring road in the middle of the left-hand lane. So everything's to the right.
So everything's to the right because if there was a vehicle coming the other way, you'd be plowing into that vehicle, is that correct?
Correct.
And your goal sort of when you're first getting out there to plow the roads is to sort of clear the middle of the roadway first, correct?
Correct.
So that's where your truck is when you first go out and plow the road, is you're sort of in the middle of the road near the double yellow line if there is one on that road?
Correct.
Okay. Now, this truck that you were driving, on that day, how long have you been assigned to that truck for plowing purposes?
I was assigned to that truck for probably 2 years, maybe longer.
Maybe longer. Were you driving that same truck in 2015?
No.
No? Okay, so you were driving a different truck at that point?
Correct.
Do you remember what kind of truck that was?
It was an F550 utility truck,
Was
pickup
that
truck.
similar in size or shape to the truck that you were driving that day?
No.
Now, you were asking questions about February 15th, 2022, when you spoke to some investigator on that day, correct?
February 15th?
Yes, 2022. That Paul person you were talking
Yes.
about. Okay. And you met him at a skating rink, is that right?
Correct.
And you said in a statement to him at that time that you would have seen a body on the front lawn or the sidewalk, is that right?
Correct.
Now, are you aware that there is no sidewalk on the same side of the street as 34 Fairview Road?
Correct.
Now, you mentioned some familiarity with the Alberts and with the Albert resident. Are there other people on that route that you're familiar with as far as where they live and who they are and all that?
Yes.
And how are you equally familiar with them, more familiar with them, or less familiar with them?
Equally.
Equally? Now, familiarity with 34 Fairview Road, does that extend to sort of the lighting around that area?
No.
So do you know that there is actually no street lighting whatsoever in the area of the fire hydrant or the flagpole or anywhere there for several hundred feet?
Correct.
So you do know.
Yeah, I believe so, yes.
And so when you're driving by, you're looking for cars coming out of the driveway, cars coming in the opposite direction, people walking, is that correct?
Correct.
And you're trying to look for those objects so that you make sure that you don't strike them or hit them or anything like that, correct?
Correct.
And on February 15th, 2022, when you had this meeting with Paul, you told him about 3:30 or 4 a.m. Is when you saw this Ford Edge on Cedar Cliffs, correct?
Correct.
Now, in fact, when you first spoke to this individual named Paul, you didn't tell him it was a Ford Edge, correct?
No, told him it was a Ford Edge.
You didn't tell him first that it was a small SUV?
No, told him it was a Ford Edge.
Do you remember at any time Paul taking you on the parking lot and showing you different vehicles and asking you if those vehicles matched what vehicle you saw?
No. He wanted to make sure that what I was telling him was accurate. So he showed me what was a Ford Edge, but I had already told him it was a Ford Edge.
So he brought you out to the parking lot at the skating rink that you were meeting at, specifically showed you a Ford Edge and asked you if that was the vehicle.
Correct.
Now, do you know sort of the difference between if you were to see a Ford Edge at nighttime in a snowstorm, the difference between a Ford Edge and a Jeep Cherokee?
Yes,
What's the difference?
the taillights in the back.
What about it?
Ford Edges are more round. The whole back facade is a little bit more round. A Jeep Cherokee are more square.
Now, what color was this SUV that you saw?
I can't tell you that. I am colorblind.
Can you tell, I'm just curious, sir, as far as your color blindness, can you tell whether or not an object is dark or light just by looking at it? Or you can't tell at all?
I can see things that are light. I can see things that are dark. I can see true colors. I can't see shades of true colors.
And so from what you saw, was this light or dark?
Light.
Now, you told this Paul individual on February 15th that the SUV that you saw was exactly where Mr. O'Keefe's body was found, correct?
Correct.
How do you know where his body was found?
I told him specifically if he was looking at the door, the front door, it was about 3 feet to the left of the door. And with
To the left of the door?
looking at the front of the door to the left of the door, pushing it up Fairview.
So if he wrote in his report that you told him that the vehicle was exactly where the body was found, that would not be true?
Objection.
No, I'll allow that.
Could you repeat that question, please?
If he wrote in his report that you told him that the SUV was exactly where the body was found, that would not be true, would it not?
That would be true. The car was to the left of the door, putting it in front of the flagpole.
My question for you, sir, is how do you know where Mr. O'Keefe's body was found? At any point in time, did you see Mr. O'Keefe's body on the front lawn?
No.
So how do you know where Mr. O'Keefe's body was found?
Through police reports, police interviews, stuff that was posted on the media.
So you've seen police reports in the media?
Well, not the
correct?
police reports, I'm sorry, but what was said during on the news.
So what you've heard on the news, not necessarily what you saw or what you know yourself, correct?
Could you repeat that question, please?
You're recounting sort of what you've heard or saw on the news, and so this doesn't come from your personal knowledge or anything about where Mr. O'Keefe was, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Now, you also spoke with some other individuals in May of 2023, correct?
Correct.
Now, did you tell those individuals that you actually came in, and when you say came in, you come into sort of the main sort of hub or the shed on Boulevard Street, correct?
Correct. We punch in.
That's where you punch in and you pick up your truck and you sort of do your checkpoint around the truck and then you go out and plow.
Correct.
Now, you were plowing on this street. Was there any other sort of subcontractor or anything else that was working, plowing the roads as well?
Yes.
And who was that?
It was by the yard landscaping.
And so they assist as far as the plow route is concerned, and they go around and they plow things on the same route that you were describing, correct?
Correct.
Now, these other people that you talked to in May of 2023, did you tell them at that time that you actually came in around 11:30 p.m. to 12 a.m.?
I don't remember that.
You don't remember that, or you didn't tell them?
I don't remember that.
That would be a significant difference, 11:30 PM to 12 AM from 2:15 AM and 2:30 AM, correct?
Correct.
Now, you also indicated to them at that time that you went past Fairview at approximately 12 AM and 2 AM, correct?
I never did 12, but it was definitely 2:30,
So if they wrote
2:40,
that in a report,
2:35.
That would be inaccurate as well, correct?
Sustained, and only one person can talk at a time.
I apologize. I'm sorry, sir. Please continue and finish your answer.
I didn't hear the question.
Okay. Well, let me ask it again. So as far as if that was contained within a report regarding that conversation in May of 2023, that you went past Fairview Road or went down Fairview Road at 12 AM and 2 AM, that would not be accurate, correct?
Objection.
Sustained, ask it differently.
Did you go down Fairview Road at 12 AM and 2 AM?
No,
If that were contained in a report of your conversation you had in May of 2023, would that be accurate?
Objection.
Sustained, ask it differently, Mr. Lau.
Now, as far as that conversation that you had in May of 2023, did you tell those individuals that you saw the vehicle around 1:30 or 2 in the morning?
again, I don't remember ever saying that.
Is that accurate as far as whether or not you told them that?
Again, I don't remember saying that.
Did you see a vehicle around 1:30, 2 o'clock in the morning?
I wasn't on the road at 1:30 or 2 o'clock in the morning.
Correct. Now, do you also recall telling those individuals that Fairview Road was blocked off by cruisers at about 3 or 3:30 in the morning?
Again, that would have been incorrect.
Do you recall saying that in May of 2023?
I do not.
May I approach, Your Honor?
Yes. Show counsel. Thank you.
Sir, I'm going to ask you to read, showing you a document, I'm going to ask you to read this paragraph, and this paragraph to yourself, okay? And then whenever you're done, just please look at it, right? Are you finished, sir?
Yes,
May I approach this retrieve? Your Honor?
Yes.
Mr. Loughran, after having reviewed that, as your memory refreshed as to that conversation you had in May of 2023,
no, it does not.
so you still, after reading that, don't recall telling anybody in May of 2023 that you came in around 11:30 PM, 12 AM on the 28th, 29th?
I never came in at 11:30, 12:30 at night. It was 2:30 calling.
You don't recall indicating to anyone in May of 2023 that you went past Fairview at 12 AM and 2 AM?
Correct, never did.
And you don't recall telling anyone that you saw the car around 1:30 or 2 AM? Is that correct?
Correct,
And you don't recall telling anybody that the part of Fairview containing 34 Fairview was blocked off at 3 or 3:30 AM, correct?
correct.
Now, if the part of Fairview that you were talking about, so you didn't say that in May of 2023, because at 3 or 3:30, the roadway wasn't blocked off, correct?
Correct,
It was blocked off sometime around 6 AM, correct?
correct.
And so if you had said that the roadway was blocked off at 3 or 3:30 in the morning, and it was actually 6, then when you saw the vehicle would have been off a little bit as well, correct?
Objection.
Sustained.
seeing the car at 1:32 in the morning, with the road being blocked off, at 3 or 3:30 in the morning, if the road's blocked off at 6 a.m., then that actually would have been, you saw a car sometime around 5 a.m., correct?
Objection.
Sustained.
Sure you didn't see a black Lexus SUV in front of the house at 34 Fairview Road around 5 a.m.?
No,
Now, you also were asked some questions and you spoke to some troopers in August of 2023, correct?
correct,
And County Canton, they have a parking ban in Canton, is that correct?
correct,
That goes from November until April.
correct.
Now, part of your plow route is a road called Tippy Cart, correct?
Correct.
Where is Tippy Cart in relation to Fairview?
It is on top of it's on the right side of Cedar Crest. It would put it 2 streets before Fairview.
And at some point, when you were plowing on Tippy Cart that night, you actually hit a basketball hoop, is that right?
Yes,
And did you call that in?
yes.
And as a result of that, what happened with the basketball hoop after that?
Nothing. The point was to make sure I was covered, basically. It's why I notified my supervisor that I hit the basketball hoop.
And about what time was that you hit the basketball hoop?
I don't recall.
Is it closer to when you started, closer to when you ended?
I don't recall. I don't recall what time.
So you don't recall anything specific about that time, correct?
No, just that I know I hit the basketball net.
And obviously, I'm not trying to put words in your mouth or anything, sir, but you didn't intentionally hit the basketball hoop, correct?
Correct.
So you hit it because you didn't see it, correct?
No, I was attempting to avoid the net by going around it, and the machine had a different size body than what it originally had, and I underestimated when I was going around that I need to be wider.
So you misjudged the distance, is that fair to say?
Yes.
May we approach, Your Honor?
Okay.
You are unmuted.
Now, sir, at some point prior to coming in here and testifying today, have you met with Mr. Yannetti?
Yes,
How many times?
twice.
And when were those times?
Tuesday and Saturday.
Tuesday and Saturday, when, sir?
Tuesday of last week, Saturday of last week.
And this Paul person that you spoke of before, was that person present there as well?
Yes,
And did you make note of Paul writing anything down or Mr. Yannetti writing anything down while you were talking to them?
no,
And as far as you're aware, there's no reports that were generated from any of those conversations or any of those meetings, is that correct?
correct.
So, sir, I'm correct if I say that you're sure about every time that you went down Fairview Road and everything that you saw going down Fairview Road, but you're completely unaware of the time that you ran into and struck a basketball hoop that night, is that correct?
Objection.
Sustained, you can ask it differently.
You're sure about all the times that you went down Fairview Road?
Yes,
And you have no idea what time that you went on Tippy Cart and you struck the basketball hoop, is that right?
if you ask me to guess, I can guess for you.
I'm not asking you to guess, sir. I'm asking you to know.
I don't recall exactly what time I hit that net.
Nothing further.
Right, anything, Mr.
Very
Yannetti?
briefly, there's just one question I wanted to make sure that we understand what's going on.
So no statements, right? Just ask a question.
I always do that. I apologize, Your
Okay.
Honor. You were asked a question by Mr. Lally. Are you sure you didn't see a black Lexus at around 5 a.m. in front of Fairview? And your answer was no. And my question to you is, does that mean that you're not sure if you saw one or that you didn't see one?
Objection.
I'll allow that.
I did not see a Lexus at 5 a.m.
At any point that night while you were plowing,
No,
you see a black Lexus in front of 34 Fairview?
no,
Thank you, sir.
Very briefly, based on your timeline, were you on Fairview Road at 5 a.m.?
yes.
How so, sir?
It was about 3 hours after the last time I went on it. So it put me, I was last on it at about 3:45, about 5:30.
You were on the road about 2:45 and you said it took you about 45 minutes to sort of do the loop and come back, correct?
Correct.
And from the time that you were on there, including the time that it took you to plow and the time that it took you to do all of those things along the route, you're coming back to Fairview Road at 45 minutes later, or it took you 45 minutes to do the route?
It was about 45 minutes.
And so from there, 45 minutes, from what time are we talking that you were first there? Said about 2:45 or so?
About 3:30 with some,
About 3:30, okay.
Yeah.
So about 3 hours after that would then be about 6:30, correct?
it was about, I mean, I know I went up there and saw the first responders coming down.
I
And when
understand. What I'm asking is, you would testify that you may, or you were on Fairview Road around 5 a.m. If you're not returning for 3 hours later, and that's about 6:30 from 3:30, correct?
Correct.
So then you were not on Fairview Road at 5 a.m., correct?
I was. The time that it took me to do what I needed to do put me there about 5. So when I'm coming down Cedar Crest from doing my route, I am constantly looking at Fairview to make sure that it's considered a main road. So we need to take that as a priority. So if it's a lot of snow on that road, I am going to go turn around and do the road so that the road is available. So first responders have access to that road.
So, sir, what I'm saying is you testified, your timeline, that you
Yep.
came down there around 6:30 in the morning, correct?
My timeline was 5:30.
So 3 hours
5:30?
after 3:30.
It was 45 minutes.
No, 45 minutes was from 2:45 to get you to 3:30. Then 3 hours later, it's 6:30,
It was
correct?
It was about 45 minutes because I didn't get a lot of time. At that time, the snow was coming down at a significant rate, and I needed to make sure Fairview was kept clear. So I come down and I check. So I have the streets are all around Fairview. They're 5-10 minutes around Fairview. So the furthest street from Fairview is Kings Road.
So my question is, sir, are you talking about coming down Fairview, or are you talking about being on another road and looking at Fairview,
Coming down Cedar Crest, looking at Fairview.
despite that timeline that you gave her?
I am always looking at that street.
Nothing.
All right, Mr. Lochran, you are all set, sir.
Thank you.
I'm going to ask Dr. Marie Russell to join us.
Okay.
Watch your step for me. You solemnly swear the evidence you give the court and jury in the case now and hearing the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
I do.
Thank you. You may take the stand.
All right, whenever you're ready, Mr. Jackson.
Thank you, Your Honor. Dr. Russell, could you please, in a loud, clear voice, state your name and spell your last name for us?
Hi, Dr. Marie Russell, Russell.
Doctor, what do you do for a living?
I'm an emergency room forensic pathologist, just recently retired.
And prior to retirement, what was your position?
The immediate position before retirement was chief medical executive at for the state of California at the Corcoran State Prison.
And
So,
please-
Dr. Russell, I'm going to ask you to keep your voice up, okay?
Yes, that's right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
There's a couple of air conditioners in here. Just keep your voice as loud as possible. What is, in fact, an emergency physician?
An emergency physician is a medical specialist who has completed a residency, internship residency in the field of emergency medicine, which is a field which involves taking care of patients that are sick or injured and go to the emergency room.
Can you tell us what your education, starting with your education, training, and background is that qualifies you as an emergency physician, starting with your education all the way back to college?
Okay. Well, I have completed at least 16 years of formal education beyond high school, which includes college, and then 4 years of medical school, then 4 years of emergency medicine residency and internship, and then 4 years of pathology residency, which includes 2 years of anatomic and 2 years of forensic pathology. And then I treated, excuse me, I've taken a bunch of other courses and attended seminars.
Let's start with your college. Where'd you go to college? Where'd you start?
MIT, I did my first year at MIT where I took my pre-med courses.
And then what happened after that? By the way, about what year was that?
Oh, that was in 1972 to 73.
Where did you go after MIT?
So what happened? I was interested in becoming a doctor, and so I took the pre-med courses, and then subsequent to that first year, I learned that my mother had metastatic breast cancer, and so I decided to go home to New York to be with her. After that, she subsequently passed away, and I returned to Massachusetts and decided to take advantage of the time off from school to investigate my interest in law enforcement. And I subsequently became a police officer here in Massachusetts.
So following MIT, did you go to a police academy?
I did.
Which police academy did you go to?
I went to the Boston Police Academy.
And did you end up becoming a sworn officer?
Yes.
For how long?
I did it for 7 years full time.
And what department did you work for?
I worked for the City of Malden Police Department.
What years was that, if you could give me a range?
From 1977 to 1984.
During the time that you were a Malden police officer, did you also go to school and continue your formal education?
I did.
Describe that for us, please.
Well, I took specialized courses through the Massachusetts Criminal Justice Training Council.
Objection, move to strike.
All right, so I'm going to strike that. Jurors disregard that.
Let me ask you this way. I don't want to get into the specifics.
Okay.
While you were a police officer, did you also take formal education to further your medical training or your college?
Yes, I did.
That's what I'm interested in.
Okay.
Tell us about that.
Oh, yeah. So I attended Northeastern University part-time and received a Bachelor of Science degree in psychology.
After you got your degree in psychology from Northeastern, did you go on to continue your education in medicine?
I did. I attended medical school at the University of Massachusetts Medical School from 1983 to 1987.
Also known as UMass?
Yes.
Did you ultimately end up with a medical degree?
Did. Doctor.
After you became a doctor, did you engage in a residency?
Yes.
What years were the residency, that first residency?
So the first residency was from 1987 to 1991, and that was in Los Angeles at the Los Angeles County University of Southern California Medical Center.
Is that also known as LAUSC?
It was at the time, yes.
And that's associated with the University of Southern California Medical Center, is that right?
Yes.
After your first residency, by the way, what was your first residency in? What was the subspecialty?
So it was in emergency medicine, and USC is a very large trauma center.
How would you describe the size and volume of the USC Trauma Center?
Well, it's one of the busiest in the United States.
After your first residency in emergency medicine, did you do a second residency?
Yes.
What was the subspecialty in that second residency?
So I did a 2 years in anatomic pathology and 2 years as a fellow in forensic pathology at the Los Angeles County Coroner's Office.
So you did 2 full residencies after you became a doctor, is that right?
That is correct.
What's the difference? I don't want to go into great detail, but what's the difference between an emergency physician and, for instance, the residency that you did in pathology, both anatomic pathology and forensic pathology? What are the differences?
Well, generally, the emergency physician treats live patients, and the spectrum of injuries can be wide, or illnesses can be wide, and the forensic pathologist treats or deals with deceased patients generally.
Did you become a fellow at the LA Coroner's Office
Yeah.
following your second residency?
No, that was part of the second residency.
Understood. Describe that fellowship.
So that was 2 years of full-time work at the LA Coroner's Office under the supervision of very experienced medical examiners. And what I did was I did autopsies, every day, 1 or 2 autopsies every day, attended conferences, and read journal articles, etc. It was a very formalized education.
Did you also become at some point a professor or an assistant professor at LAUSC, the medical center side, the university side?
Yes. So while I was doing the forensic pathology and anatomic pathology residencies during the daytime, I worked as a full-time ER doc supervisor in the capacity of an assistant professor in the evenings.
Did you also become an adjunct professor at Cal State Los Angeles, California State Los Angeles?
Yes.
Is that a separate university?
Yes.
And you had separate responsibilities as a professor in that role?
Yes.
Were you also teaching legal medicine and forensic medicine in that capacity?
That is correct. It was a master's level program.
How long were you an ER physician in total and an attending physician for Los Angeles County USC Medical Center?
29 years in total. 4 of those were in training and the rest were as a supervisor. And
Of your 29 years, 25 of your 29 years, you were supervising others,
correct.
meaning other doctors,
Other doctors, yes.
teaching other doctors,
Yes.
and teaching medical students.
Yes, and seeing their cases. Once they examined the patient, they would present their case or tell me about the case, and then I would go in and see those patients in addition to my patients.
That was my next question, doctor. In addition to teaching, were you also specifically assessing, diagnosing, and treating patients of your own?
Yes, not all the time. Some shifts I didn't have to do that, but much of the time, yes.
For the bulk of the 29 years that you were an ER doc, an emergency physician, in other words, were you also attending to patients as well?
Yes.
Once you left that fellowship with the LA Coroner's Office, did you remain active in any way or connected to the Los Angeles Coroner's Office?
Yes, so I would attend their weekly conferences when I could, when I was available and to do so. And I also consulted on some cases with them. So if they had something that was interesting and beyond their clinical expertise, they would sometimes consult me.
During your tenure at LAUSC, did you become the director of any of their sub-programs?
Yes.
Can you describe that for the jurors, please?
Yes, I was a director of the USC Center for Life Support Training. So, that involved teaching other doctors life support courses such as advanced cardiac life support, or we teach the surgeons advanced trauma life support.
I'm sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
Were you also a director for their quality improvement in the early 2000s?
Yes, for the emergency medicine department.
What was the reason for the quality improvement program, if you will, for LAUSC?
Well, for any program, it's ideal to have a quality improvement component, because what you want to do is look at cases that were treated and see if there were any errors, and if so, correct the errors, teach the doctors that involved, what went wrong, and try to make systemic improvements or teaching improvements to prevent those errors from occurring in the future.
Were you teaching basically best practices for emergency room physicians as well as trauma physicians and surgeons?
Yes, we tried.
And you were the director of that program, correct?
Yes.
Did you also become the director of LAUSC Jail Medical Services?
Yes.
What is the connection or the tether between the jail system in Los Angeles and LAUSC Medical Center?
Well, LAC Jail Ward was established about 70 years ago, and it was a place that the officers from various agencies, such as LA Sheriffs, LAPD, California Highway Patrol, or any of the municipalities around, could bring people that they arrested who were in need of medical care.
So the jail system, very large jail system, I'm guessing, in Los Angeles, correct?
Correct, yes.
There have to be medical attendants to that jail system, correct?
Yes.
And you became the director of the jail medical services for the entirety of that system?
For the hospital component of it.
Understood. In California, you're obviously licensed in California.
Yes,
There is a state medical board in California, correct?
yes.
And did you ever do any work with that state medical board?
Yes, I worked with them for about 7 years part-time as a regular employee embedded in their enforcement unit. And what that involved was examining cases that were referred to the medical board because of substandard care or illegal activities of the providers. It was for physicians and physician assistants that we regulated.
What was your title with the state medical board for those purposes?
The title was medical consultant. That was the official title.
Okay. And then before your retirement, by the way, what years were you the medical consultant for, or a medical consultant for the state board in California?
But I think from 2009 to 2016. I think those were the years. I'm not positive.
All right.
I did that. That was a job I was doing. One, I was doing the LA County USC Medical Center job too. It was an extra job.
So you didn't stop working as a physician, an emergency physician at LAUSC to take that position?
No.
You just consulted with them?
I did it once a week, 1 day a week.
Got it. And then with regard to one of your last positions that you held, did you become the chief medical executive for the California State Prison, Corcoran?
Yes.
Tell me about that position and the years that you held that position.
So that was from 2018 to 2023. And as the chief medical executive, I was the supervisor of all the doctors and nurse practitioners that provided care to the inmates.
And obviously the California prison system is a very large prison system.
Very.
Doctor, are you board certified in emergency medicine?
Yes.
Are you a member of the National Association of Medical Examiners?
Yes, I'm actually fellow status, which is higher than member.
Are you a member of the American Academy of Forensic Science?
Yes, again, I'm a fellow there.
Which also is an advancement above just being a member?
Correct.
Have you ever published in the area, and now I'm going to get very specific, have you ever published peer-reviewed articles and done research in the area of animal bites and scratches?
Yes.
Did you author or co-author a peer-reviewed article named Managing Law Enforcement Dog Bites in the ER?
Yes.
About what year was that?
It was in the 1990s.
Late 1990s, 1996, does that
Yes.
sound right? Did you also author or co-author an article called Law Enforcement Canine Dog Bites, Injuries, Complications, and Trends?
Yes.
So given those articles, did you study specifically dog bites, dog wounds on the human body?
Yes, I have a very strong interest in wounds in general, and I have a strong interest in dog bites in particular.
During the course of your career, your professional experience, how many patients would you say you've seen or treated with animal injuries, including bites and scratches?
It's very hard to estimate, but between my own practice and the residents that I supervised, it was, I'm sure, well over 500 and could possibly be double that.
Could be up as many as 1,000.
It could be, yes.
Have you qualified as an expert in emergency medicine in the past?
Yes,
You qualified as an expert in the area of forensic pathology and wounds in the past.
yes,
Is that both in federal and state courts?
yes,
Doctor, were you asked to review certain materials related to this case in furtherance of coming to some opinions and conclusions about injuries suffered by John O'Keefe specific to his right arm?
yes.
What did you review in coming to your opinions and conclusions?
Well, I reviewed hospital records and pictures taken of him in the hospital, when he was in the hospital. I reviewed autopsy records, the autopsy report, and photographs taken during and before the autopsy. I reviewed, let's see, I reviewed reviewed the grand jury testimony of the autopsy pathologist. I reviewed affidavit of Dr. Sheridan. I reviewed the town of Canton dog bite reports about regarding incidents.
Section, may we approach?
Yes.
Good after this, I'll report back in session. Please be seated.
So the Commonwealth's objection is overruled. You can continue.
Doctor, you've listed several items that you've reviewed in coming to your opinions and conclusions. Did you also review a toxicological report
Yes,
and a neurology report, neuropathology report
yes,
as well from the Commonwealth?
yes,
Based on your review of all of those materials, I don't want to know what your opinion or conclusion is yet, but were you able to come to an opinion or conclusion concerning the injuries specifically to John O'Keefe's arm,
Yes.
or his right arm? Were there any documents in furtherance of your review from UC Davis?
Yes.
Did you review those as well?
Objection.
Sustained.
With the court's permission, may we display Exhibit 19, please?
Okay.
Doctor, I want to show you a photograph and ask you very quickly, have you seen this before?
Yes.
Is this one of a number of photographs that you reviewed in furtherance of your evaluation of this case?
Yes, it is.
I'd like to just focus your attention on this for just a quick second and ask you, does this accurately reflect the wounds or injuries that you saw on John O'Keefe's right arm in coming to your opinions and conclusions?
Yes, it reflects the injuries that I saw in photographs.
All right. Now, based on your review of all of the data that you've talked about, all of the information that you were given and reviewed, what is your opinion or conclusion about how these injuries were sustained?
I believe that these injuries were sustained by an animal, possibly a large dog, because of the pattern of the injuries.
Could you describe for the jurors, please, on what you base that opinion?
Yes. Well, may I use the?
Sure.
Okay, thank you. There's a number of patterns here. There, on the upper part of the arm, there's parallel lines, and those were inflicted by either teeth or claw marks. So there's a number of patterns that could be teeth or claw mark. And so this is one set right here. This is the one further down, closer to the elbow, is another set of parallel marks. Again, probably most likely from teeth marks. And the reason I say that is, in addition to the parallel marks up here, down here, there's also little punctate, incomplete puncture marks here, little round marks right there that were inflicted by the actual point of the tooth.
Okay, that was my question. What relevance does that have to your determination that this was likely caused by an animal?
Yes, and I can explain in a moment the various kinds of wounds that animals can inflict. But going on with the picture first. So then down right at the elbow, there's another different series of marks that again have linear abrasions up where the pointer is, and then down below some punctate, superficial, round, small abrasions, again representing upper and lower teeth, in my opinion. And then there are some irregular wounds down just below the elbow. And these are all, by the way, on the exterior surface, or what we call what doctors would call the posterior surface of the arm, which is the part of the arm that would sustain defensive type wounds. So if someone were to protect themselves.
Objection.
So sustained. Next question.
Sure. Doctor, if I can ask another question. Just to clear up what you said a little earlier about some of the wounds close to the elbow, is it your opinion that both the top teeth and bottom teeth could have created some or all of the injuries on that elbow area?
Yes.
Okay, so in other words, instead of the mouth going all the way around the arm, it could have, the top and bottom jaw could have situated itself on this portion that we're seeing, the posterior part of the arm?
Yes, and in this case, the animal did not get a good enough contact.
Objection. Move to strike.
So I'm going to strike that, ask a different question.
Have you seen contact wounds where the animal, a dog, for instance, gets a very solid purchase on the leg, arm, part of the body?
Yes.
Okay, is that this or is this something else?
Something else.
Describe that.
Well, when an animal inflicts injuries, the type of injury depends in part, on the actual type of contact and how much force is applied by that animal, in addition to any relative movement between the animal and the victim in this case. So, for instance, in the law enforcement dog bites, many of
Objection.
Right. So the nature, is it notice? Is it, what's one word?
May we approach?
Okay.
You are unmuted.
May I, Your Honor?
Yes.
Thank you. Without getting into any specifics about police canines,
Okay.
does the pattern of injuries that you see appear consistent with an animal or a large dog?
Yes.
Does the number of injuries that you see here relegated to just the right arm, is that also consistent with an animal or large dog?
Yes, it can be.
Is the direction of the injuries or the consistency of the direction of the injuries, or the parallel injuries, is that also consistent with an animal or large dog attack?
Yes.
Based on everything that we've discussed today, Doctor, is it your opinion, based on a reasonable degree of medical certainty, that these injuries were from an animal attack, possibly a large dog?
Yes.
Have a moment, Your Honor.
Yes.
That's all I have at this time, Your Honor.
Okay.
May we approach?
Okay.
You are unmuted.
Hey, John.
Sure.
Good afternoon, ma'am.
Good afternoon, sir.
Now, testified that you're certified in emergency medicine, is that correct?
That is correct.
And you're not, nor were you ever certified in forensic medicine, is that correct?
That is correct.
Pathology?
Correct.
And when was the last time that you worked at a coroner's office?
1995 in terms of doing autopsies. Yes.
Now, when was it that you first spoke to anyone from defense counsel in regard to your coming in here and testifying today?
May 17th.
Doctor, I am going to ask you to keep your voice up.
Oh, sorry.
Thank you.
May 17th, 2024.
May 17th of this year, is that right?
2024.
So about 6 weeks after this trial began.
I don't know when the trial began.
Now, as far as who reached out to who?
I reached out to a district attorney that I worked with with the LA coroner's office.
And then somehow that person put you in touch with Mr. Jackson, is that right?
Yes,
And was that also on May 17th?
17th and 18th, yes.
So I'm sorry, 17th or the 18th? Which one was it that you spoke with Mr. Jackson?
I didn't speak to him.
You did not speak to him?
Not speaking, not verbal. There was some email communication or text communication.
You communicated with him, was that
Yes.
on the 17th or the 18th?
Yes, both, I think.
Both, okay. And when did you render this opinion as far as what you've testified to here today?
Shortly after he sent me the files.
Now, in regard to those files, you testified in this court a couple days ago, correct?
I did.
And you were under oath at that point, is that correct?
Excuse me?
You were under oath at that point, is that correct?
Yes,
And when you were asked specifically what materials that you had reviewed, you included a number of items, but you did not include anything about a Dr. Sheridan affidavit, anything about a UC Davis report, or anything about any sort of bite history for a canine that lived or resided at 34 Fairview Road, correct?
that's correct because I hadn't reviewed them then.
And so since then, 2 days ago, now you've reviewed them, correct?
Yes, I became aware that those files existed, yes.
You became aware of those files. Were they not sent to you previously?
No, I think there were technical difficulties regarding me and the computer and downloading from Dropbox. And so, yeah, so
You ever-
they were, I think they were sent to me, but I think I didn't open them.
Now, with reference to these technical difficulties, did you ever express any of those technical difficulties, or, hey, I can't see the whole file, or there's other things in here that are listed that I can't look at?
No, I wasn't aware.
And so with regard to, as far as your reaching out or contact in regard to this case, how did that come about?
I saw an article, I believe it was in the Boston Globe regarding this case. And I didn't, initially I didn't think anything of it. Then I saw an article that indicated that there was some,
I'm not asking you anything about anything, any article indicated. You saw an article in the Boston Globe about
Yes.
this case, is that right?
yes,
And how did you come upon it? You have a subscription to the Boston Globe?
I did at the time, yes,
Did at the time. What time was this?
in May,
May of 2024?
yes.
And how long had you had a subscription to the Boston Globe at the time that you saw this?
It was either a 6-month subscription or a year, I don't remember.
And that was the first time that you had seen anything about that?
First time I paid attention to anything like that, yes.
Now, again, you had testified here just a couple of days ago when I asked you questions about this, is that right?
Yes,
It wasn't in your testimony just a couple of days ago that the subscription was actually for a year or 18 months. You
No.
Remember, not 6 months a year.
So only one person can talk at a time. So was that your testimony, doctor?
no, I don't believe so. I believe that I said it was a 6-month subscription or a 12-month subscription.
In any event, you saw something, that's the first time that you recall seeing anything in the media about this case was in May of 2024?
It was the first time that I recall reading anything about it. Correct.
Now, did you write a report in regard to your opinions that you've testified here today?
No,
And I asked you that a couple days ago as well.
yes,
Okay, so in the
sir.
last couple of days, you've had time to review a UC Davis report, Dr. Sheridan's affidavit, and any sort of dog bite history, but you haven't had a chance to write a report?
Objection.
Sustain to that form.
You haven't written a report, correct?
That's correct.
Why not?
I haven't been asked to write a report, sir.
Now, did you ever look at anything related to Mr. O'Keefe's head injury?
I looked at,
Sustained. Yes.
You are unmuted.
May I have a moment, John?
Yes.
Now, doctor, you testified that you had some familiarity with areas of forensic science. You're on some boards, things of that nature. Is that correct?
yes,
And as a result of that, or any other work experience, are you familiar with a NAS report from 2008?
not with that limited information, no.
You're not aware of a report issued by the National Association of Forensic Science in 2008, which specifically has a section dealing with
So I'm going to see you both at sidebar again.
You are unmuted.
So ma'am, you're not familiar with that report specifically as it applies to forensic odontology?
So could you say that again, Mr. Lally? What's the report?
The National Academy of Sciences 2008 report in relation to the section referring to forensic odontology.
I'm not familiar with that specific report, no.
So then you equally unfamiliar with the representation that that is not from the NAS report, that is not a reliable science as far as bite marks are concerned.
There are certain aspects of bite marks that have been deemed not reliable. And that I believe has to do with saying that this particular person or animal inflicted this particular bite. But that's very specific, and that's what I'm aware of, that recommendation.
You're not aware of any findings in the NAS report that has led to questioning of the value and scientific objectivity of such evidence?
For specifically identifying a bite mark to an individual that might have inflicted the bite mark, I think that's what that applies to.
Okay, I'm not asking, again, this is a report. Are you familiar with it or are you not familiar?
I'm familiar with a summary or a abstract of a report that indicates that forensic odontology is not is deemed not reliable when it comes to that particular narrow aspect of forensic odontology.
And so you're not familiar with it also talking about sample data and collection, analyses of these, interpretation and reporting of results. You're not familiar with those areas of the NAS report as well?
What specifically, do you have a specific question about that, or?
My first question was whether or not you're familiar with the report. You indicated that you weren't.
I did not read the report.
From the report.
Mr. Lally,
Sorry.
let the witness answer one question at a time, one speaker at a time. Doctor, can you answer that question?
Sure. I did not read that report.
Now, you had written some articles that you were asked about in reference to dog bites or canine dog bites in the emergency department. Is that correct?
Yes, co-authored.
Something that you published or authored or co-authored sometime in the late 1990s. Is that right?
Correct.
And in that instance, you talk about law enforcement dogs and a bite and a hold technique, correct?
Yes.
Now, part of the reason in writing that article had to do with sort of the applied forces and the unique spectrum of injuries from those kind of dog bites. Is that correct?
Yes,
And that spectrum of injuries would include deep puncture wounds. Is that right?
they can. Yes.
Severe crush injuries. Is that right?
Correct.
Large tissue avulsions and lacerations. Is that right?
Yes.
Wounds necessitating surgical debridement. Is that right?
Yes.
Bony injuries ranging from cortical violations to displaced fractures. Is that right?
Yes.
Neurovascular damage. Is that right?
Yes.
And other wounds at high risk for infection, correct?
Correct. But we also put a disclaimer in that article.
I'm not asking you about any disclaimer.
Okay.
I'm asking you about that's what the type of injuries that you were looking at. Is that correct?
Yes, but we saw a skewed population.
You skewed population in a study. Is that correct?
What we saw the worst of the worst.
Or no? Did
Yes.
You skew the population in the study.
I'm sorry, I don't understand the
Did you
question.
skew the population.
Did we
in the
skew
study?
did we skew? No, we reported on all the ones that presented to the emergency room for care. However, a lot of dog bites don't present to the emergency room.
And so from the different cases that you report on within that article, are there any of those cases in which there is injuries to just one aspect of one part of the human body for the victims of dog attacks or dog bites in those cases?
There may have been. That's a summary of the 700 cases, more than 700 cases.
Is it normal in any kind of animal attack for injuries to occur on just one side of one arm of the person that's being attacked, clawed, or bitten?
There are many people who are bitten or scratched
I'm asking
Only-
if it's normal, ma'am. That's all I'm
Okay,
asking.
so hold on, Mr. Jackson. Mr. Lally, ask a question, wait for the answer, and then start a next question. Do not interrupt the witness.
I apologize. I don't mean to interrupt, but I'm asking for an answer responsive to the question.
So ask a question and ask it in a manner that you get a responsive answer.
Dr. Russell, is it your testimony that it's normal in an animal attack for injuries to occur on just one side of one arm and nothing else, anywhere else on that person's body?
It can be, yes.
I'm not asking if it can be. I'm asking, is that normal?
I can't say.
It's sustained. You have to ask the question differently.
So from your observations, you looked at various photographs of Mr. O'Keefe, is that right?
I did.
Did you observe any injuries on any other part of his body that you would attribute to an animal attack, whether they be claw marks or bite marks or anything else?
No,
So nothing on his left arm, correct?
nothing that identified as a dog bite or
Nothing on
scratch.
his legs, is that correct?
That's correct.
Nothing on his torso, is that correct?
That's correct.
Now, you say an animal attack, possibly a large dog, correct?
Yes.
Can you say what type of animal left these marks that you attribute to an animal attack?
Not with 100% certainty, no.
Can you say where physically Mr. O'Keefe was located when those the animal attack supposedly occurred?
Objection.
Can you say that?
No.
Okay.
Can you say when Mr. O'Keefe purportedly sustained these injuries from an animal attack?
Well, to a certain degree, yes. Before, yeah, it was before death, but not long enough to have a big inflammatory reaction. So yes. So minutes to hours before death.
Minutes to hours before death, but at some point before death, correct?
Yes.
Can you say anything about the breed of dog?
No.
Can you say anything about whether it occurred inside the house, outside of the house, anything like that?
No.
As far as you mentioned some of the different things that you reviewed over the course of your testimony, or the preparation of your testimony, both prior to Tuesday and between Tuesday and today, any of those things contain any forensic reports or phone examinations or anything else related to this case?
Could you repeat that? I didn't. What kind of examination?
Any
Phone?
of the materials that you reviewed, whether it be prior, sometime between May 17th and Tuesday, or anything that you reviewed between Tuesday and today, did any of those materials that you reviewed contain any sort of forensic reports or anything beyond the UC Davis?
Yes, I saw a photograph.
Okay, so you saw photographs. And to that point, you never actually saw Mr. O'Keefe's body, correct? You just saw photographs?
That's true.
And with respect to the UC Davis report, as far as canine DNA, are you aware that the results of that were that there was no canine DNA on Mr. O'Keefe, on swabbings that were sent to the UC Davis lab?
I'm going to allow it.
Yes, but there was clothing in between.
Okay, but the swabbings came from the clothing with tears in
Okay.
the clothing in the same area as the injuries, correct?
Okay.
Do you know that or no?
I couldn't tell if they came from the wound or the clothing. I thought that they came from the clothing, but
You couldn't tell by reviewing the report whether or not the swabbings came from clothing or from Mr. O'Keefe's body.
I know the clothing was sent to the laboratory,
You know the clothing was sent to what laboratory?
to the DNA laboratory.
To UC Davis?
Oh, I don't know that. No, I'm sorry.
You are aware that that came back as far as negative for any canine DNA, correct?
That's correct.
Now, as far as the injuries that you observed, your testimony is that both the top teeth of whatever animal this is and the bottom teeth of whatever animal this is both made contact with only the top of Mr. O'Keefe's arm or the posterior of his arm?
Both sets of teeth made contact with certain of those wounds, yes, but not all of them.
But neither the top nor the bottom teeth made any contact that you observed, assuming your issue as far as an animal attack. There's no evidence of any animal attack on the bottom of Mr. O'Keefe's right arm, correct?
I'm not sure what you mean by bottom.
Anterior,
Interior? That's correct.
and nothing on the posterior or the anterior of his left arm,
That is correct.
and nothing on his legs,
That's correct.
nothing on his torso,
Correct.
nothing on his head. Is that correct?
Correct.
Now, as far as the marks that you did observe that you do attribute to an animal attack, can you even say with certainty whether or not those marks you feel are bite marks versus scratch marks? Do you have any idea which are which?
There may be a combination.
So is that a no?
Well, no, I think that the ones that had the linear abrasions above the small round punctate abrasions, I believe that those are bite marks from upper and lower teeth.
Now, you indicated that part of what you had reviewed was a dog bite history for a dog from 34 Fairview Road named Chloe. Is that right?
Yes,
And there were a couple different instances of that dog essentially getting in a fight with other dogs, correct?
yes.
And at any point in time, did you see anything in there as far as a dog going after a human in which there was no other dog present?
No,
And there were actually photographs contained within that material of dog bites from that dog, from Chloe, correct?
yes.
Did any of those dog bites that you saw in those photographs look anything like what you observed in the photos that you saw of Mr. O'Keefe's arm?
No, but, okay.
That's all, man.
Objection, Your Honor.
No, so the answer is no. You can get back up, Mr. Jackson, but the answer to that question is no. Next question.
So is it your testimony that from reviewing what you reviewed, that what you observe on Mr. O'Keefe's arm is consistent with an animal attack to the exclusion of any other possibilities?
To a degree of reasonable medical certainty, yes.
So as far as any other sort of blunt impact injuries or other manifestations of how those scratches got there, you're saying, nope, had to be an animal attack.
I've seen thousands of wounded.
Tell me. What I'm asking you is.
All right,
somewhat-
so Mr. Lally, I'm going to let the witness answer.
Go ahead, ma'am.
I've seen thousands of people with injuries to their skin. And from blunt, from sharp, from all different mechanisms. Those injuries did not look like blunt force injuries.
So it's your testimony that the injuries to his arm don't look anything like blunt force injuries that you've seen before. You wouldn't characterize them as that?
That's correct.
And that's based on some photographs and some other materials that you began reviewing sometime May 17th, 2024.
Yes, I'm an ER doctor. I need to make a diagnosis quickly when I see something, and I'm trained to do that. That's my specialty.
Were you being asked as an ER doctor to come to a quick conclusion in this case?
No,
But you did anyway.
it's how I'm trained.
Nothing further.
Very briefly, Your Honor.
Please report.
Go ahead.
Concerning the forensic odontology report, the NAS report that Mr. Lally asked you about, what is your understanding about the report as it pertains to identifying individuals who left a bite mark? Explain that to the judge, please.
I believe the report says that that is not reliable as it once was thought to be.
Like a fingerprint identifying a human being, DNA identifying a person, or a bite mark identifying a person. NAS said, not the bite mark, doesn't work that way.
That's correct.
Has nothing to do with the pattern of injuries that you've seen 1,000 times from animals, correct?
Correct.
You were asked several questions about the injuries that you saw and studied attendant to highly trained canines, police dogs, correct?
Yes,
Very different than just a domestic dog that somebody might have as a pet, correct?
correct.
And the bite injuries are very, very different as well, aren't they?
That is correct.
You were asked whether or not you were aware, based on UC Davis's report, that there was no canine DNA found on the swabs that were sent to them, correct?
Yes,
Are you also aware that there was pig DNA?
I'm aware of that.
Did that have any impact did you analyze that at all, one way or the other?
Not to any degree of scientific certainty, no.
But you do know that dogs chew on pig ears sometimes, correct?
Objection.
Sustained.
You've reviewed at least a report, if not a series of reports, that indicate that a particular dog breed has an attack history, correct?
Yes,
You were asked specifically by Mr. Lally whether or not the wounds in a dog attack on another dog attack where a human stuck a hand in the middle look anything like these, correct? Remember that question?
I remember a question like
And
that.
you said no, but, and then you were cut off. Remember that?
Yes,
You finish that answer for us.
yes. So animals and dogs in particular can inflict a wide variety of injuries on the skin, from just individual puncture wounds to abrasions where there's a scratching of the skin, to where there's actually a pulling away pulling away of the skin from the underlying tissues, your ripping effect. And so there's a variety of wounds that or patterns that one can see from an animal attack. It depends a lot on the thickness of the skin, the movement of between the victim and the animal, and also the power of the animal and the training of the animal. Yes,
So in other words, not all wounds inflicted by a particular animal are going to look exactly the same.
correct.
Very dynamic situation, isn't it?
Objection.
Sustained.
Doctor, having seen up to 1,000 bite and claw marks on the human body, and based on your review of the entirety of the case file that you reviewed, including the nature and the pattern and consistency of the injuries that you saw on Mr. O'Keefe's right arm, what is your opinion to a reasonable degree of scientific certainty about the nature of those injuries?
Objection.
Sustained.
What is your ultimate conclusion and opinion about the injuries that you saw and that you reviewed and that we saw today?
Objection.
Sustained.
Can you tell the jurors at the end of the day what is your opinion and conclusion about those injuries?
Objection.
Sustained.
Can we approach?
you, Your Honor. No more questions.
You are
And
unmuted.
Mr. Lally, you had no more questions?
No, yeah.
Okay. All right, doctor, you are all set.
Okay, thank you.
All right, jurors, we will take our luncheon break.
Court, all rise for the jury. You may be seated.
I just want to know who you have this afternoon.
Just Richard Green, Your Honor.
All right, thank you.
You are muted.